Welcome to this edition of La Miranda Living. It is July 4th, 2020, and it is a beautiful morning here on 4th of July in La Miranda. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Elizabeth LaScala, who is a college advisor in Lafayette, and she is going to share with us today about sort of what her services are, and in particular about how things have maybe been changing in this new world order where we have a pandemic. So, Elizabeth, how are you today?
Good morning, Jennifer. I'm doing just fine. Thank you. Happy 4th of July, and thank you for taking the time to interview me on a holiday.
Absolutely.
Everything's fine here, though. Everything's good. Sun is shining here in Lafayette as well. It's a
good. All right, great. The microclimates between Moraga and Lafayette do not always guarantee the sun is both shining in both places,
right.
But it is today. Good. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much. What we really do want to just check in with you about, actually, before I get into your services, tell us a little bit about, you. I guess, do you live in Lafayette? How'd you get to the La Miranda area? Let us know a little bit about you.
I do live in Lafayette. Okay. And we chose Lafayette in part because of the sunny weather, where you have more sun rather than clouds here in Lafayette. Although the entire area is just beautiful. And we also chose to live in Lafayette for the public school system.
Okay.
To make sure that we didn't have to think about private education in high school because that's so expensive. And so it was the school system that drew us to Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda.
Okay. And you've been here for how long?
Today is 23 years exactly.
Nice.
We moved here in 1997 on the 4th of July.
Well, happy anniversary.
Happy
in so
house
many ways.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's a perfect timing.
So you have an office over near Kelly Hood, right off Dewing Avenue.
Dewing Avenue.
Mm-hmm. And it's a great little area. And you have a business that's called Dewing College and Beyond. Is that correct? Okay.
That's exactly right.
Can you just share a little bit about what your job is and how you got into this line of work?
Okay, well, I'm a college admissions advisor. I work with high school students and their parents for college planning. And then I work also with young adults and working professionals who may be looking at graduate or professional school education. And so basically my job is to find the right match for applicants, whether they're applying to college or graduate or professional school, the right match in terms of their academics, their socially and financially. So they are able to thrive and be successful in the college environment. So basically I'm a match.com for colleges. Someone once said, which I think is a great way to put it. Yeah. And the way I got to, I guess I'm an entrepreneur in that sense, but I went down a long road, Jennifer, of higher education from a bachelor's degree of science in New York City, moving into medicine, moving beyond medicine into public health. So the infectious disease epidemiology background I have really helps me understand more about what's actually going on today with COVID. And then from there, I got a PhD at UCLA, but I had a 5-year gap where I worked for Los Angeles Public Health Department, then went on for my doctorate. So with that long history of education, you can imagine that friends and family members and good neighbors were always asking me questions about higher education, getting into college. My own children, I always wanted them to succeed academically, and that was a focus for me. And 2 of the 3 children are athletes. So my neighbors would want to know, how did I manage the children getting such great grades and also being able to pursue their athletic interests? And eventually it struck me that I was helping people in large numbers and not getting paid for it, essentially. And I thought my husband might have said something along the lines of, we're not a nonprofit, maybe you should hang out your shingle. And that was 14 years ago. And that's exactly what I did. I opened my business first in my home, and then I moved into this office here in Central Lafayette.
Okay.
So that's hopefully that answers your question.
It does. So I have lots more, many more questions for you.
Okay.
So for 13 of those years, you sort of had a formula. You knew your colleges. You did your research. You placed people based on their passions, their skill set, whether or not they wanted a big school, a small school, a rural school, an urban school. And then COVID-19 hit. And my question is, how has this new experience changed what your job is? Big question.
In terms of the college search and the college match, depending on where we're talking about in high school, let's say we're talking about seniors, those individuals who are already they're already graduated and they're ready to look at college in the fall, and they know where they were supposed to be going.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a safe environment? Should they go? Should they defer? Should they take a gap year? Should they look at another option instead of the original option, the original choice? So it depends on the grade level, and what this family is asking me at the time.
So I'm sure you're getting lots of different types of questions, lots of different sort of fact patterns of where people are coming from. But what are, in your mind, if you were one of these parents and you had one of your kiddos who's on the way either back to or to school for the first time, what do you think are the most important questions that parents should be asking or doing the research around in partnership with you to make sure that they are, fully informed and making a good decision about going to college in the fall?
I would start with, what is the college doing related to health and safety for incoming students or returning students who are coming for the first time as freshmen, and then students who are returning. And I have many specific questions. I have a document I've put together of questions that should be asked. College leadership has to be transparent and honest. They should be thought of as a trusted member of your team, a parent, student, and the college. And if they're not rising to the occasion of putting out information that helps you to understand how they will treat your child once that child comes to campus, if they're not doing their jobs as leaders with consistent messaging of plans and transparent messaging, and then being willing to say, I don't know, we're still trying to figure this out, we've been thrown some curveballs, rate of infection is rising, we're pivoting in a different direction. That's what they need to be doing. The parents need to keep on top of it, and this college that they're thinking about their child returning to or going to for the first time needs to do their job in terms of transparency and honesty, and I guess following public health guidelines if they choose to reopen, following the public health guidelines.
So let's sort of move to what the colleges are grappling with. They've got a lot of different stakeholders. They've got a ton of different issues that they're having to sort out at the same time. What are sort of some of the big ticket discussions that you at least expect are happening at the tables, at the universities, at the college, as far as brokering all of this stuff? What are they talking about? What are they thinking about?
Well, given that I've been in admissions in a couple of university settings, I can think about what the conversations used to be like. And they always revolved around, are we going to be able to fill our incoming freshman class? And are we going to fill those seats with students that represent a nice balance on campus? In order to have a balance, every student brings something unique, because that makes balance. If every student is balanced themselves, a little of this and a little of that, jack of all trades kind of person, that's not giving the college balance. So you're looking for unique students to make a balanced incoming freshman class. So let's look at that. How has that changed? Colleges were always concerned about enrollment and summer melt, what we call summer melt, where the students decide to not go to that school, but to another school. And that situation has become much more problematic for colleges now. They are fearful of their bottom line being hurt. It already has taken a hit due to the parents wanting and students wanting refunds for closures last spring. So colleges are thinking about how to stay in business and how to keep their coffers full of enough revenue to get through this crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that would be number one. And then, given that they're thinking about their revenue and their solvency, their financial viability, they're thinking, what do they figure parents and students care about the most, and their faculty and staff who have to get onto campus if they open. And so the number one issue there would then be health and safety and putting measures in place, regardless of how much expense they might have to incur to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So health and safety concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So have you heard of any sort of best practices? I mean, everyone right now is brainstorming in the private and the public and in all different communities about how to make things still work while honoring public safety and public health guidelines. Is there any schools that you've been monitoring that you thought, that's a really good idea as a way to sort of solve some of the issues for people coming back onto campus next year?
I am seeing that smaller colleges seem to be able to come up with innovative solutions that really do that. These solutions really do reduce the number of students in each classroom and passing in the hallways, in residence halls, and in cafeterias. And so the smaller colleges, when you only have 1,000 to 4,000 students, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
undergrads, you're able to come up with a scheduling plan. Tinkering with the academic calendar is the best way to put it. They kind of tinker with it. And in the case of a few colleges, Beloit, Colorado College was always on the block plan. Cornell College, they're coming up with what's called block scheduling. And that's an innovative solution that may be very helpful in reducing the rate of any kind of infection from
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19.
So
the larger colleges are probably going remote for 70 to 80% of their classes.
Okay, so take us back for a minute. I went to Colorado College. I know what the block plan is, but
Okay,
just, thumbnail sketch, what does a block plan mean in 30 seconds or less?
Well, you probably know. Let me turn the
Okay, that's fine. I'll tell you.
Taking one or two courses. Well, first of all, you take the academic calendar and you break it up into 4 equal pieces for the fall. So you might have third week in August to the second week in September, third week in September to the first week in October, and so on. So 3.5 to 4 week blocks,
Mm-hmm.
where you can take 1 or 2 courses,
Yeah.
which means you can get all the credit you need for at least the semester between August and early December.
Yeah.
And that plan allows, or you could just do the 3 of those 3.5 week terms and still get a full semester of education.
Yeah.
And then go home early and have a long break if you wish, November, December, maybe even January before returning, which would give the colleges time to see what happens with COVID-19.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most innovative, but remember that can happen in very large universities. This is for a smaller liberal arts and science, or even a smaller STEM school, and there are smaller size STEM schools out there.
Yeah. So I do think that the block plan is a great idea for this moment in time. I have kids. They are going to camp now, and the only way they're able to make camp work is by putting them in small groups, and then you stay with that group throughout the entire camp experience. And so it becomes your cohort or your little cell or your little bubble. But being at Colorado College, that's exactly what I did. I took one class for 23 days.
Yes.
And then in that class may have been from 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. And then at the end of those 23 days, I took my exam and I was done with it. And then I took a 5-day break, and then I went back into that to the next class. I had 8 courses in a year, a full schedule, but it was immersive learning, head first, and you're just with those people morning, noon, and night in study groups and in-person classrooms, et cetera. And I think that right now it's a brilliant way to mitigate the situation. Certainly, we can't solve for everything, but I think it would give a lot of parents a little more comfort that they are not sending their children into battle simply by having them show up at the school that they want to go to in the fall, because the school they want to go to in the fall may not exist. So with that sort of intro, let me take you to what you would say, parents and students, how do they need to manage their expectations for the fall, knowing that one shoe doesn't fit all and that all schools are going to look different and have a different calculation about how to roll things out? What are sort of the low-hanging fruit that is going to be different for everybody and that kids need to be prepared for?
Well, first, I'd like to go back to the colleges that can do the block plan.
Okay.
That may be a fabulous solution. And you actually, having gone through Colorado College, which has used the block plan as long as they have been in existence, as far as I know, there are not a lot of schools in the country that have that plan to begin with. And only the smaller schools, if they do adopt that plan, only the small schools really would thrive using that kind of plan. It would be very hard to go with a school larger than a few thousand students and make that work.
Yeah.
I just want to say that because it's not a panacea. It is, you asked about an innovative option, and that's an innovative option. Now, we could have all the students who were planning on going to, let's say, the University of Michigan, my alma mater, all of a sudden flood small liberal arts and sciences schools with transfer applications or new applications from the summer, and say, do you have any room? I want to switch. Those few schools on the block system would certainly be overrun pretty quickly. But there may be other schools that are small size that are moving to the block plan as well. So I don't have the exact count. But the majority of colleges nationwide are larger. And enough of them are larger for me to say that there are other factors that students and parents need to be thinking about. And I think the biggest issue is for them to look at is how much of the programming will be remote online and how much of the programming will be in person, and is what your child planning to study going to be adversely affected by the way the school decides to deliver education during the fall. So
are there certain topics that you think would be much less conducive to remote learning? So if somebody wants to go in with the subject intention of pre-med or the sciences, that may be something that would be impacted in quality?
In the larger school environments, even in the big ones like UCs and USC, USC is a private school with 18,000 to 20,000 undergrads, looking very much like a UC, but with a private school price tag. And then the UCs themselves, like UC San Diego or UC Berkeley, UCLA, my alma mater, those schools are right now coming out with plans to be 70 to 80% remote learning and 10 to 30% in person. And the in-person classes will be labs and performance-based classes.
Okay.
So those would, as you correctly pointed out, the pre-med track, you should be taking 2 sciences in your freshman year, a biology and a chemistry class. And although you can deliver content online, and you need the lab in order to have that course be accepted by medical schools further on down the line. Performance-based classes, dance, for example, some of these courses have to be done in person for them to benefit the student in the way the student originally hoped to get their education done at the college. So those are things I'd be looking at and asking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also be asking about the health and safety guidelines that are being adopted by the school, and be convinced that it's not only safe for your child to go, but you're safe for your child to return home afterward. Because again, the younger individuals seem to be, although they can certainly get sick from COVID and some can get very sick, the majority are have milder infections in the age group, let's say 15 to 30. And so it's, for me, it's more a question of thinking, how much risk do you want to take related to your child coming back home? And as our testing gets better, we'll have a better rate of I think it's specificity or sensitivity. If it comes back negative, it really is a negative result. You do not have COVID, you can safely come home. So the testing issues are paramount in terms of, I hope what you're asking about, that low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing I've been thinking about as you're talking, that as far as discussions that the schools need to be making beyond how are we going to keep our professors safe and our students who are, on campus housing safe, and what are we going to do with the Greek system, and what are we going to do with extracurriculars and sports? I mean, it seems like an overwhelming amount of things to put into the pot and somehow make a cake out of.
Right.
Do you like my analogy? But the other one that I think would be so important for parents to research and know is, what are going to be the compliance expectations with social distancing, masks, et cetera? And is there going to be sort of a new code of conduct that needs to be adopted? And what happens what are the consequences going to be if somebody doesn't follow it? Because as we know, the younger population is feels invincible many times, and they may be flouting some of the social distancing rules, though I don't mean to demonize them at all.
Right,
I get
right.
it. But I mean, a college with all of the ingredients of the freedom, the alcohol, the excitement, people may not make great decisions. And then what do the schools do with that kid or those kids or that one party that ends up violating the rules? No different than violating the rules around cheating.
So the new normal is going to be an adjustment for young people on the road to college. Those who are going for the first time probably will adapt more easily, I hope, to the guidelines, because they've been following them during high school. They've watched this pandemic unfold in real time. They know how careful their parents have been or not. They know how much they care about whether their grandparents are exposed, or older friends or family or neighbors are exposed. They may be able to adjust more easily to this in some ways. The returning students have known college in a very different way, and it may be harder for them to come back to their campus and have all the rules and regulations, but they did have the summer months to adjust. I'm hopeful that the majority of young people will be socially responsible, just like we want them to be socially responsible related to drinking, related to parties, related to driving under the influence. Just like we're hoping that our young people get those messages, we're going to hope that they also get these messages in terms of compliance to guidelines that are meant to keep them and others safe on campus. But I think the biggest adjustment is that people expect the normal or want the normal. We all want the normal. Everyone does. The parents do. I do. I don't know anyone who would say, gee, this is fun, and I want it's something that they're hoping will continue. But while we have it, we have to be help our young people to understand the importance of being safe, putting safety and health first for themselves, but also for others.
Yeah.
This concept of caring about others is a huge deal in our society because we're a very individualistic society. We're taught about individual freedoms and want to be able to go and follow whatever path or unique area we want. And that freedom is very special to us. But right now, that freedom is limited due to a very serious public health crisis. If a student is caught being out of compliance in the classroom or in the cafeteria or in some environment where the rules are in effect and the college actually has something to say about it, they probably will receive a warning or two or even three before maybe they be put on probation, academic probation.
Interesting.
That's not being separated from the school necessarily, but that certainly could be being asked to quarantine, test to see if they're actively infected, and then take all their classes online rather than in person. I think insofar as colleges are able to monitor, that's what they'll what they'll do. But when you're out of sight, you can't be watching everything in the residence halls. You're not going to be installing cameras and watching to see what the students do when they're alone.
Right. Do you think, generally speaking, that private schools, and often correlating with the private liberal arts education, are going to fare better for maintaining the old traditional schooling experience?
Fare better
fare better than a university that's a large university that may be forced to go more remote. I guess I'm thinking based on classroom size, based on perhaps money in the coffers that can be dispatched to different things. If someone comes to you and say, I want my child to have as close to the normal experience as possible that we expected, is it going to make a difference if he or she goes down the liberal arts, applies to a liberal arts school as opposed to a UNC Chapel Hill?
I think the answer is yes, and I will give an example of a private high school versus a public high school. Our public high schools closed and went to online learning with credit, no credit for this past spring. Private high schools in the area, and I have clients from private high schools, they did online learning, but they also rotated in and out of labs when they needed to in small groups, and they were able to assign grades. So there's an example that is going to answer your question. If our high schools, there's a difference between the public and private, there's certainly going to be a difference in the colleges as well.
Mm-hmm.
In the private colleges, especially those that are financially strong, are top 20 or so liberal arts and sciences colleges, or even the top 50 nationwide, that have enough revenue to be able to create a different experience for the students, get everything in place, because it's costly to get your campus safe. It's not easy to put in these plastic barriers and move students through small groups instead of the larger groups. And I don't know what they'll do with athletics. Maybe they'll have them happen and the students will get to watch them in the common area, in groups of some sort. But I would say probably the smaller liberal arts and sciences colleges will have more success in preserving that experience.
What about on-campus housing? Do you think that that's going to sort of be pushed, that it used to be, or that freshmen and sophomores were required to be in the dorms?
I believe what the COVID has done is make the situation with housing go back to step one. They're thinking, oh, now we have to spread students out in our housing. We have to bring triples to doubles and doubles to singles and leave spaces in between for quarantining students. So that plan has changed dramatically and has affected student housing and will affect student housing for the next couple of years.
Okay. So just to put a fine point on it, are you hearing from schools that they are actually going to be encouraging and possibly requiring kids at the younger levels, freshmen and sophomore, to be doing off-campus housing?
What I'm hearing is they're welcoming the freshmen first as a priority for housing. They want those freshmen to come on board and have as much of the real college experience as possible by being able to reside on campus. Then the sophomores and older students are being encouraged to find off-campus housing when possible. So, yeah, again, colleges are trying to secure revenue. I know you may not see it immediately, but when you think about it, if you don't offer those incoming freshmen the real college experience as close as possible, you may lose them. And so that's you could look at the motivation as they're the youngest, the parents want them safe, and so on and so forth. You could look at it that way, the benevolent colleges who are trying to make it right for students. And then you can look at it as a business decision. And it's really both. It's a good business decision, and it's also benevolent in the sense that the younger students need a chance to start their college careers on campus when possible. And then they're also asking people who are local to the area to think about remote learning and not live on campus, whether they're freshmen or not.
So I've got two more questions for you.
Okay.
One is, you mentioned deferring very early on in your conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that my thought would be that some students would say, okay, I know I got into University of Texas at Austin, and I'm really excited to go, but Mom, Dad, I don't want to go spend $40,000 a year if I'm going to have to do the classes from my dorm room and I'm not going to be able to go to the football games. Let's defer. Are you hearing a lot of your clients consider taking a pass on this year, sort of assuming and hoping that next year will be, a go back into what we were hoping the college experience to be? And my second part of that question is that a concern, or how would that impact the colleges? They expect a student body of 15,000 coming in, and come, September 1, half that group actually appears.
I am not hearing a lot of my clients tell me that. But remember, when the seniors this year graduated and knew where they were going to go to college, whether it's Lehigh and University, or whether it was Harvard or Princeton or UC Berkeley, they don't necessarily get back in touch with me and say, by the way, we've decided to defer. But I would bet that most of them are waiting to see what happens. Is deferral a good idea? For the freshmen and the sophomores, maybe. Because they could take a structured gap year and see what happens for a year and ask the school to allow them to defer so that they're not putting themselves at risk or spending, like you said, the $40,000 in order to have a less than normal college experience. So yes, it could it could happen that by as the summer progresses and these infections don't get under control and we don't see a vaccine that's effective emerge, you might have more of those families, again, unbeknownst to me, decide to defer. I may get calls from those families saying, "What should we do? We've decided to defer." And then I would suggest a structured gap year to have a really full-bodied experience, whether it's to go to the community colleges and take courses that would then get college credit, or whether it's to find a job, even if it's virtual, or to work at Safeway or Starbucks and take a course or two for credit. So that may happen, and it may well happen in August. It may well happen right at the end, right at the beginning of August or the second or third week, but they have deposited. All of these families that are working with me have given schools deposits. So they would forfeit that deposit if they just pull out altogether. If they ask to defer, the colleges are going to be likely to defer. If they ask them to reduce tuition and fees, or they're not going to send their child because it's going to be a less than normal experience. If they just simply say, we want you to reduce your sticker price, then I think colleges are in a position where they must bargain and they'll probably reduce fees. So I'm not sure. Then the second question, I think I folded into the answer, but if you have a follow-up, let me know.
So unfortunately, I mean, I do. I have lots of follow-ups, but I think for time we need to wrap up soon. So, but I want to thank you so much for all of this information. I am going to ask you one last question,
Please.
and that is, and then we'll go into the lightning round. But then we really will leave.
Okay.
Which is, a lot of what you are sharing is things that is already publicly available information if anyone wants to do the legwork about what any particular school is doing, about what a different school specialization is, et cetera. Can you share a little bit about sort of your niche market? Like, why does somebody come to a college advisor? What is the service that you provide that really, makes a lot of bang for the buck? I don't say that because I don't think you do. I would just like to sort of have you articulate a little bit about, what is the service that you provide and what would somebody gain from coming to you rather than just doing it on the internet themselves?
A college advisor's role, especially one that has had as much experience as I and a number of my colleagues have had, is that we have the long view. We've seen history, the trends, we see how they're changing, and we also have access to college admissions data and college enrollment data that is not out there in the public eye. It's like a financial advisor. If you wanted to balance your own portfolio and minimize risk right now and so on and so forth, given your age, your time, thinking about retirement, how many children you have in your family, would you do all that on your own or would you seek the advice of an expert? So I do believe that the reason individuals come to college advisors who are expert in their fields and stay up to date is in order to avail themselves of that kind of expertise and guidance step by step and uniquely focused on their student and their family circumstances. There are many things that college advisors do for families that demonstrates their level of experience and the fact that they have many places to go to glean information that is not available. Also, you often don't know what you don't know. And so you may think you know and start researching. And yet, if you don't know what to look for, you may be missing the most important pieces that relate to your family.
All right. Well, Elizabeth, again, have a wonderful 4th of July. We really appreciate all this information, and hopefully some people may contact with you and ask you some follow-up questions.
I'd love it. Thank you so much for having me on board.
All
this
right.
morning.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.